Greetings all! Today, we are going to take a special look at the electric type and analyze its attributes, the Pokémon assigned to the type, and how it functions from a combative standpoint. Definitely existing as one of the flashier types out there in terms of pure spectacle, the electric type is one that allows Pokémon to harness one of the most fundamental components of the universe as a tool in battle and provides a nasty shock to anything that dares to underestimate it. The type itself might not have many types that it is truly super effective against, but it makes up for this with some of the strongest and most crippling attacks known and can more than use raw power to obliterate anything that dares to get in its way. You may have to wear some sort of protection against your own Pokémon at first if you really want to be safe, but when the Pokémon assigned to this type are truly in their element, there is very little stopping them from becoming a powerful threat that only truly grounded foes will ever have a chance at seriously avoiding damage from. The electric type is not surprisingly defined by the capacity to generate and wield electricity as a weapon, though in the majority of biological cases, these powers are designed to be more defensive in nature than offensive, hence why the vast majority of the powers possessed by Pokémon assigned to the type involve the use of high voltage electricity and not high amperage, as the latter is much more likely to kill rather than harm. For some of these creatures, these powers come as a result of them possessing a sac in their bodies that is laced with protons, and when connected to free electrons in the air, allows these creatures to generate an electric current. For others, this current is generated as a result of chemical reactions from bacteria contained in parts of the user's body, breaking down organic compounds to make an ion-rich slurry that can then be used to conduct a current. Still others are able to harness electromagnetism to create a current, either generated inside of them or by interacting with the planet's electromagnetic field and other devices. But as a whole, these powers all tend to be highly damaging towards most types of life. The presence of powerful electrical currents in the bodies of these creatures do give them some unique properties, and because their bodies are often adapted to being able to discharge energy and prevent their electrical powers from interfering with their muscles and movement systems, they are completely immune to paralysis. Moreover, though simple, the ways in which these creatures deliver attacks is striking and mesmerizing, with special attacks focusing on raw bursts of electrical energy and physical ones almost always involving the user of a move electrifying part of, if not their entire body, and ramming into an opponent with said form to deal damage. This can make these attacks very difficult to dodge and counter in many cases, and helps to set the type up as something that few will want to mess with unless they are grounded and relatively safe from harm. The electric type is one that is spread over a fairly large group of different organisms and entities, but as a whole, the most dominant group that possess access to this power are mammals. This is likely due to the fact that their anatomy is more conducive to the electrical organs and sacs that are often responsible for the creation of electrical discharges, plus their predator and prey relationships make it more likely that they will be attacked and may develop these powers as a defense against those that might otherwise wish to do them harm. Thankfully, the type does have a foothold in quite a few other biological groups, even if they are still fairly rare to find in said groups, so the type has at least some level of diversity to keep opponents on their toes and make gauging their electrical prowess difficult initially. In looking at the overall move variety of the electric type, the Pokémon assigned to the type are usually fairly limited in terms of the types of offense they can specialize in, with their electrical powers often overtaking any other aspect of their combat abilities. For many, any secondary typing and basic attacks arising from the body form they might have help to define the other types of moves they can possess, with only a few exceptions getting considerable variety in their moveset that extends past their primary and potential secondary type assignments. This can make the type a bit tricky to work with against many opponents, as only a few different types are actually weak to the electric type, but it nonetheless means that these Pokémon are truly masters of the type and can use their natural anatomy to make the most of the type and electrify mostly anything that isn't completely immune to their assaults. In terms of stat averages, the electric type is one that is all about mobility and special power, and more than makes up for its otherwise lackluster performance with some dazzling stats in these regards. Sadly, the electric type is not among the most powerful statistically, and tends to fall a bit behind in most things, as the creatures that wield its power are not always the most gifted when it comes to taking damage, delivering it physically, or taking much in the way of damage in terms of stamina, resulting in its base HP, attack, defense, and special defense stats all being below average compared to other known types. On the other hand though, the Pokémon under the type specialize in being able to deliver powerful electrical shocks as special attacks and can move quite nimbly, oftentimes having their own electrical powers supporting their high movement speeds, so the type's base special attack and speed stats are above average in this regard, and more than capable of making them a threat from afar. As such, while the type might not be incredibly powerful on its own in all cases, it is nonetheless able to make itself a nuisance from afar, and definitely serve as a dangerous type to go up against if one cannot outspeed it and resist the special damage the type thrives the best at delivering and that many Pokemon under the type are capable of inflicting. Currently, there are 51 recognized types of electric-type Pokemon, 27 of them being pure electric types, and the remaining 24 being dual types, not including Alolan Raichu. Additionally, 13 of the dual types are primary electric types, while the remaining 11 are secondary electric types. They are broken down into the following categories. Mammals. These Pokemon are all unified by the fact that they are mammals, and while the forms that they take vary greatly, they are all the same in that they are able to use some sort of built-in biological system to generate and store electricity in some form or another. Even though they oftentimes resemble similar non-Pokemon animals in their biology, they are still quite different because of their electricity-producing powers, and can usually make good use of their powers and natural biology to prove to be a powerful threat to have to face unprotected. They are limited in the amount of power they can produce as a result of their living nature, and may have to rely on sources of power as weak as static electricity sometimes in order to get the most out of their abilities, but as long as they don't exceed the biological limits of just how much energy their bodies can handle, they can often prove to be quite the rambunctious creatures to face. Fish. These Pokemon are all unified by the fact that they are fish, and are generally among the rarer of electric types to see as a result of their biology and choice of habitat. In the case of the members of the Chinchou family and Stunfisk, these creatures have developed their powers as both a way to navigate in the deep waters in the case of the former at the very least, and are able to release electricity to stun and kill potential prey to make short work of them, Stunfisk in particular using their entire electrified bodies as a trap for anything that accidentally gets too close to or steps on them. The members of the Tynamo family are unique in that they prefer to dwell on the land in many cases, and in turn can prove to be nasty customers to have to deal with both in and out of the water. Insect Arachnid Morph. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that they are either insectoid or arachnid morphs in form, and generally are only able to use electricity as a weapon thanks to a gelatinous organ that exists in the frame that utilizes bacteria and chemical reactions in order to generate an electrical current. On the one hand, the members of the Joltik family are able to use this power to create electrified webbing to make hunting easier for them. On the other hand, Charjabug and Vikavolt are more designed to use their powers directly, with Charjabug using their power as a deterrent against attacks from predatory bird Pokemon, and Vikavolt being more offensively minded and using their powers to shoot down and destroy the same types of bird Pokemon they once had to fear before evolving fully. Birds. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that they are birds, and not surprisingly, they are a rare treat to see among the various Pokemon in possession of natural electrical powers. Zapdos are powerful legendary Pokemon that are able to generate and live within thunderstorms at a whim, and are revered for their incredible electrical powers, using their feathers as biological circuits to transmit energy to and from the body to generate a powerful electrical current that can deal devastating damage to anything that they strike. Oricorio are only considered electric types while in their pom-pom style form, and while they cannot really use any major electric type attacks on their own, they are able to make good use of the Revelation Dance attack in this form to deliver powerful electrical punches with their wings that can deal considerable damage and stun lesser foes readily. Artificial. These Pokemon are unified by the fact that they are artificial in nature, being the result of man-made actions in an effort to create powerful and useful utility Pokemon for certain jobs and purposes. The members of the Magnemite family were originally created as an experiment in the use of electricity to create and fuel life, and are powered by internal Tesla coils that allow them to take electricity from power lines and generate and release it as a powerful, high-voltage current that can electrify anything while helping to generate an electromagnetic field that keeps them aloft in the air on a constant basis. The members of the Voltorb family, on the other hand, were created as anti-theft deterrents before they went rogue and started to evolve, and are now recognized as being highly dangerous in many regards as a result of their tendency to overcharge themselves and detonate when threatened, or, especially in the case of Electrode, when they simply feel like it for fun. Living Stone. This special category is reserved for the members of the Alolan Geodude family as a result of their unique electrical powers, which only seem to be observed within the confines of the Alola region. These creatures possess an unusually high concentration of magnetic minerals in their bodies that can hold an electrical charge, replacing the mud that normally acts as a binding agent in the bodies of their normal counterparts, and thus allows them to store an electrical charge in their bodies that grants them the same damaging properties and powers as the electric type, hence their unusual type assignment. This can grant them access to some pretty powerful moves and make them noticeable contenders to deal with, though the type assignment does render them doubly weak to the ground type, and they in turn must be used carefully to make the most of their unusual offensive strengths. Reptiles. This special category is reserved for the members of the Helioptile family, which are primarily desert-dwelling reptiles that have managed to develop the unique ability to convert solar energy into electrical energy, enabling them to energize their bodies more rapidly than normal and therefore spend less time in the sun where they are vulnerable to attack. The partial electric type assignment that comes with these powers, however, makes them vulnerable to attack from the many ground-type Pokémon that also inhabit their normal environments, so the overall advantages their powers provide can oftentimes be negated in their native environments. Even so, these creatures are able to make good use of their electrical powers to wield rare and unique moves like Parabolic Charge, and as a whole, are fairly spry critters, more than capable of delivering powerful and rapid electrical shocks to anything that dares to threaten them or get in their way. Spiritual. This special category is reserved for Rotom when they are in any of their forms, and are unique among electric types in that they are effectively little more than animated balls of plasma that have managed to gain sentience through abnormal interactions with spiritual forces. As such, Rotom are able to attack with powerful bursts of electricity without putting themselves at normal risk, as their bodies possess the same physical properties seen among ghost types. Aside from this, however, Rotom are extremely unique in their capacity to possess certain types of machinery and take on elemental associations with their particular appliance, gaining a unique partial type and access to a certain attack in exchange for their ghost type attributes. Force of Nature. This special category is reserved for Thunderous, a member of the Forces of Nature trio and the only member of the trio that utilizes electricity as a weapon. This is possible thanks to their tail, which acts as a self-sufficient dynamo that can process electrical energy and release devastating thunder attacks with near-perfect accuracy. Thunderous tend to be mischievous to a fault and take equal pleasure in causing chaos of all types, whether it's something as simple as knocking out a generator or as drastic as setting an entire forest on fire. Thunderous are usually despised by people for the sheer devastation they can cause without any care, but considering that their powers are equally applied to clearing dry brush so as to starve major forest fires, the true nature of their presence is a bit muddled. Guardian Land Spirit. This special category is reserved for Tapu Koko, a legendary Pokémon that is said to be the guardian spirit of Mele Mele Island in the Alola region, and the deity responsible for the appointment of Hala as the kahuna of the island in the recent past. In the past, this island guardian served along the other Tapu spirits in protecting the region against attacks from Ultra Beasts, and in turn helped establish the modern system of kahuna leaders and the Island Challenge. This mystical fairy has the power to summon thunderclouds at will and stores vast quantities of electricity within its body, usually absorbed from lightning bolts, accelerating its bodily movements to the point where it can be far too quick for the human eye to follow. This deity is incredibly curious and has a bit of a hair-triggered temper, but its mind generally moves just as fast as its body, so it usually forgets what made it mad an instant later. Legendary Dragon of Ideals. This special category is reserved for Zekrom, an exceptional case among electric types in that it inherited its abilities from Kyurem when it was initially split off, taking a large degree of the beast's natural power in the process. It could be said that Zekrom's ability to manipulate electricity could be seen as a connection to the electrifying, life-giving nature of ideals that allows tradition to transfer between generations and exist continuously and constantly even as time passes on and cultures change, but its true biological purpose, if there is any, is still a mystery. Even so, Zekrom is able to generate extremely intense blasts of electricity from its turbine-like tail and is capable of energizing its body with electricity to a degree unseen among other electric types to deliver physical strikes of immense force, namely the Fusion Bolt and Bolt Strike attacks, the latter being unique in that it has a power greater than the similarly designed Volt Tackle attack without any recoil. Ultra Beast. This special category is reserved for Xurkitree, one of the extra-universal entities known as the Ultra Beasts. Xurkitree possess an electricity-generating organ that enables them to fire off devastating bursts of electricity with an internal body structure that resembles electrical wiring, allowing them to transmit electricity through their body with great efficiency. the creatures possess more electrical power inside of them than any other known species of Pokémon, with the capacity to release bursts of electricity of 1,000,000 volts at a time, and thus making them a severe threat to any and all life forms that electric current can be conducted through. If these creatures need to recharge their power supply, they will simply plug the legs and tail into the ground and absorb electricity from the earth itself, though they have been known to raid power plants if they are desperate for energy. In looking at the electric type's advantages and disadvantages in battle, in terms of offense, the electric type has 2 advantages, 3 disadvantages, and 1 negative immunity. The type is at an advantage against the flying type because most flying types need their flying appendages to function in order to fly and move around. Concentrated bursts of electricity have the effect of disrupting their muscle movements and potentially paralyzing them, which, if it happens, can cause them to drop out of the sky and be rendered incapable of readily fighting anymore, further potentially dealing damage to their muscle and nervous systems that can render them completely incapacitated. This is one of the few major advantages that the type has against other Pokémon, and serves as one of the biggest general weaknesses of flying Pokémon as a whole. The type is at an advantage against the water type, because water is an excellent conductor of electricity as a result of dissolved ions inside of it. These ions allow for charges to be passed readily through the liquid, and can thus allow it to permeate every single cell in a creature and deliver the charge to the most well-protected areas, providing much less resistance to the flow of current and dealing immense damage to them in the process. This serves as one of the major weaknesses of the water type, and a problem for them, since it also is one of the few offensive type advantages the electric type has, and while some water type families have partial ground type assignments to them, electricity is still something that is otherwise universally feared by these creatures and ultimately renders them completely vulnerable to even the most mild of electrical shocks. The type is at a disadvantage against the grass type because many grass types have the ability to ground themselves by planting their roots or some other sort of appendage into the ground in order to create a conduit for electricity to travel through that avoids their vital internal components, thus weakening the damaging effects of any electrical attack used on them. This process can be quite effective for most mild shocks, but higher amperage rates can override this power, so stronger attacks will likely have some effect. Thankfully, the bodies of these creatures are still able to generally handle excess charge fairly well, and thus show a great natural resistance against the otherwise shocking type. The type is at a disadvantage against the electric type because, as one might imagine, the fact the Pokémon assigned to the electric type are able to conduct and store charge in their bodies effectively enough to use as a weapon means that they naturally possess a built-in resistance to their own electrical powers, and by default, those of others, providing them a useful natural resistance against electrical attacks. The type is at a disadvantage against the Dragon type, because of the Dragon type's renowned ability to readily suppress the damage dealt by a number of different natural elemental types, with the electric type being one such elemental energy form that they're able to take damage from and be relatively unfazed by in many cases. Lastly, the type has no effect on ground types because Pokémon assigned to the ground type naturally possess a biological path of least resistance in their body that helps to redirect electrical energy that enters into their body away from their muscles and vital organs, allowing them to turn their bodies into living grounds when on the earth below them or even in the air. As such, no matter how strong the attack might be, any electric type attack that strikes them will always be redirected away from everything that could be possibly hurt internally, thus making the type completely immune to damage from electrical attacks. This serves as the crowning glory of the type, and its biggest appeal in battle from a defensive position, and can more than make the Pokémon assigned to this type tough nuts to crack without something other than electric type offense at one's disposal. Defensively speaking, the electric type has 3 resistances, 1 weakness, and no immunities. The type is resistant against the flying type because most electric type Pokémon are able to generate electrical bursts from their bodies that can act as a damage buffer against certain types of attacks. In this case, any move that involves the use of wind-based power can be abated or disrupted by an electrical discharge, severely weakening the move in the process. Resistance to physical attacks come as a result of Pokémon delivering the moves being less than willing to get close to Pokémon that are coursing with electricity, lest they end up getting a harsh electrical shock in return from sheer contact. The type is resistant against the electric type because, as already mentioned, Pokémon that are assigned to the electric type are able to conduct and store charge in their bodies effectively enough to use as a weapon, so they naturally possess a built-in resistance to their own electrical powers, and by default, those of others, that provides them a useful natural resistance against electrical attacks. The type is resistant against the steel type for 2 main reasons. For one thing, because most types of metal are able to conduct electricity to some degree, coming into contact with them can prove to be a hazard to most steel types, so they are more leery of using their full power for fear of contact retribution. Plus, strong currents can potentially disrupt the bonds between metallic atoms and destroy the metal coverings used to create steel-type physical attacks. As far as special attacks go, the high-voltage electricity that flows through electric-type Pokémon often acts as a useful dispersal agent of light-based energy, thus helping to heavily reduce the damaging power of steel-type special attacks. Lastly, the type is weak against the ground type because electric-type Pokémon, when using electric-type attacks, typically experience somewhat of a feedback loop that can result in their power returning to them to keep them at least partially charged after using said attack. This is designed as such because they often rely on electricity as both a defensive measure and as something to keep their bodies going, and they can become extremely weak if this power is drained from them rapidly. When these creatures are hit by a ground-type attack, it acts to both introduce a ground into the equation and create a rearrangement of charges in the body that forces them to discharge their stored energy, with the power being absorbed either through mud or the earth below them, and thus severely weakens them in the process. This is the only type vulnerability that the electric type has, and thus serves as the pinnacle offensive power of the ground type, and one that is truly the bane of nearly every electric type Pokémon out there. As far as using the electric type in battle goes, the type is definitely one where there are honestly more positive things to say than negative as a result of its effectiveness as a tool of warfare in a fight. While electricity itself is a dangerous weapon in any form, most electric types utilize high-voltage electricity instead of the type of high-amperage form that is found in power lines because the development of electricity as a biological weapon is one done out of defense, the Pokémon using this power relying more on their physical biological form as a tool of offense. As such, the name of the game is to stun or otherwise incapacitate the opposition, not outright kill them. However, there are some exceptions, as the members of the Magnemite family can reverse this process and create high-amperage electrical attacks that can kill very easily if they are not kept in check. The type tends to feature limited move variety among its members, and thus is the only primary tool that can serve as a devastating source of power in these creatures, and they all tend to mature at a slightly slower pace than others, making it a bit harder to raise them than other types of Pokémon. They can also be a bit of a hazard to handle at a young age, especially if they are still being trained or otherwise have limited control over their power, requiring many young trainers working with the type to wear rubber attire in order to ground the current and prevent it from shocking them. Thankfully, this type has much more going for it than against it, as not only does the high-voltage electricity prove to be fairly safe and unlikely to critically harm as often as the counterpoint, but it is also a great type to use offensively, as only a few types are actually resistant against damage from it. Moreover, the type is only weak to the ground type, and while they are also completely immune to damage from electrical attacks, this, coupled with the type's immunity to paralysis, helps to make it one that very few opponents will be able to completely resist if they don't have a beneficial immunity of some sort. They also tend to be of above average intelligence and thus easier to work with than some other types of Pokémon, making the act of training them fairly easy once a trainer manages to form a decent bond with their Pokémon. Overall, the electric type is definitely a force to be reckoned with in any fight, for its ability to at least deal neutral damage to most types, and even if it might not always be wielded by the strongest of fighters, the best of the type can more than electrify the opposition and present to them a vibrant and shocking display of power, more than capable of shutting down the strongest of opponents instantly, or at the very least incapacitating them before a final electrical strike cooks them and reduces them to little more than a fried husk. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always an honor to be able to speak with you all on the subject of Pokemon in a way that brings me great joy and happiness in my work. If you would like to keep tabs on past and future work, click that subscribe button, check out my work on DeviantArt, and don't be shy about following me on Twitter, where you can find pertinent announcements on upcoming work before it is officially posted. Links to both can be found in the video description. If you would like to support my work and help Miguel and I continue to produce more content for you and improve upon our presentation, please visit us at my Patreon page, which you can also find a link to in the video description.
Yep, no.
With that, I thank you for watching and I wish you well.